When I was little, I grew up in a trailer park. I didn't have a lot of friends. You could say I was somewhat of a lone wolf, so I kept to myself a lot of the time, usually getting lost in my imagination, reading comics and watching TV. Around 8 years old, I made my very own first friend. My friend's name was Adam. Adam was always there with me. He was my best friend that year. He wasn't there every day, and he would only be there at certain times of the day. Usually right as I would get home from school, which was the loneliest time of the day for me. I'd be home alone for at least 2 hours, until my parents came home. He'd always ask how I was, and what I did that day. Sometimes, he would ask me to go to different places in the house, usually in the bathroom, where he could hear me better. I would sit in the tub and talk to him. My brother could hear him too, but he lived with my grandparents, so he wasn't over very often. I don't think Dad ever heard him, because Adam would never talk when he was around. Adam would want me to go outside a lot. Sometimes I did, but I never met Adam or saw him. Then one day, Adam just stopped talking. I never heard from him again. Now that I'm older, I pray every day that it was a ghost or a spirit. That'd be easier to swallow than the very likely story that there was someone living under my goddamn house. My mom had a stalker for years. She was maybe in her early 30s. I was about 3 when this all started. My dad would leave for work in the morning, and as soon as he was gone, the calls would start coming in. She'd answer the phone, and some guy would be saying all this sadistic sexual stuff, messed up stuff he wanted to do to my mom. She was beyond frightened and didn't know what to do. Sometimes the caller would describe what she was wearing, or say exactly what she was doing at that minute. My parents were struggling financially, so we couldn't just up and move. My mom started spending the night at my dad's mother's house. Then the cops got involved, but they couldn't trace the call. Finally, my parents saved up enough money for us to move. I was around 6 by this time. The phone number was changed and unlisted in the phone book. This was around 1988, when everyone still used landlines. My mom never got another scary phone call, but she had nightmares for years. When I was little, I remember walking into her bedroom in the morning. She'd be crying into her pillow. She'd explain later in life that she'd wake up from a nightmare and just shake and cry. A couple months after we had moved, the cops informed us that they had finally caught the guy. It was our next-door neighbor's 19-year-old son. He had been in the military, but was discharged due to severe mental illness. I guess he was put into some sort of special security home, one that specializes in mental health. The lead investigator said that the son was obsessed with my mother. They found a box in his room full of a bunch of photos. Photographs candidly taken of her when she was out in the garden, even when she was playing with us kids in the yard. It chills me to the bone to think about it now. Anything could have happened to me and my mother when my dad was at work, and I'd be too young to help her. For my 5th birthday, my uncle got me an old Pee Wee Herman doll. I was a big fan of Pee Wee's Playhouse, so I loved it. In my room I had bunk beds, and I slept on the bottom bunk. The top bunk was where I kept my favorite toys and stuffed animals. I'd often leave them in really weird formations after having battles and the like. I always remembered to leave certain ones in certain places, as they were my favorites. Namely my Ninja Turtles and my Pee Wee. A few months after getting this toy, I started having terrible nightmares about it. And not the "Are you afraid of the dark" 90s nightmares, but truly graphic and horrible dreams, where someone had broken into our house and made me watch him torture my sister and my parents, while the doll just laughed. So I told my parents, and they immediately got rid of it. This apparently just meant they hid it in the garbage. I was little, so I couldn't see stuff stored up high anyways. A couple weeks later, I woke up, and my Ninja Turtles were on the floor. Confusing, but maybe I shook the bed a bunch in my sleep. A few days after this, my older sister woke my parents up, screaming about a dream she just had. It was nearly identical to the dream I had told them about, but I know she had never heard about it. My parents as well, and my mother looked genuinely horrified. I got screamed at for telling my sister such horrible things. But once it became clear that I hadn't really told her, my mom looked even more worried. I watched her go into the garbage, grab Pee-wee, put him in a trash bag, and put him in the dumpster. For years, I'd wake up, and my stuffed animals would be in really odd places. In places I would have never left them. I was obsessed. When I was 12, I found Pee-wee in a box in the garbage. My mom said that my dad must have come home, seen it in the trash, and pulled it out. My dad doesn't remember doing this. He swears he didn't even know she threw it away, let alone try to get it out. Coffins used to be built with holes in them, attached to 6 feet of copper tubing, and a bell. The tubing would allow air for victims, buried under the mistaken impression that they were dead. Harold, the Oakdale gravedigger, was patrolling the graveyard, as he did every night. Upon hearing a bell, he went to go see if it was children pretending to be spirits. Sometimes it was also the wind. This time, it wasn't either. A voice from below begged, pleaded to be unburied. "You Sarah O'Bannon?" Harold asked the voice.
Yes, 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 yes.
The voice assured. Harold raised his brow. Then he asked, "You were born on September 17th, 1827.
Yes, 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 yes.
The voice replied excitedly. Harold then took his dark, ragged top hat off, holding it against his chest, with his other hand on his shovel. "The gravestone here says you died February 19th? He then asked the voice.
No, I'm alive. It was a mistake. Take me up. Set me free.
The voice pleaded. She sounded scared and angry at the same time. "Sorry about this, ma'am," Harold said as he put his top hat back on. He then stepped on the bell to silence it, plugging up the copper tube with dirt. "But this is August. Whatever you are down there, you're alive no more, and you ain't coming up." The voice cursing the gravedigger as he walked away smiling. It was near Halloween time, and my friends and I were telling ghost stories. My friend told us a story about her parents' first date. She didn't like telling the story because it was actually true. But we convinced her to tell us anyway. They had a lovely time on their date, despite how awkward it was at first. The sun was setting, and it was time to head home. Rather than say goodnight, they decided to go on a hike up Provo Canyon. Her father knew the place well, as he had done a fair amount of rock climbing there. So the two drove up to the mouth of the canyon. The scenery was beautiful. Hiking under the light of the stars and the new moon. At some point, her father started to get a bad feeling, since the pathway ahead would be dark, and because it was quite late. He ignores the feeling and presses on. They both continue to walk under the trees, stepping further and further into darkness. Her mother would later say that she felt the same feeling as her father. They both chose to ignore this until her father hit something soft. Something directly in the middle of the path. It was too dark to see what it was, but the uneasy feeling came back, stronger than ever. Instead of finding out what his foot bumped into, they both agreed to hightail it out of there. Years later, after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with the serial killer, Ted Bundy. In response to a question, asking him to describe a time he felt the closest to being caught, he talked about the night he lured a girl into Provo Canyon. He had just killed her when he heard some people coming up the trail. He explained how he hid in the trees just in time, only to watch a guy walk right into the body. And for some reason, just turn around and walk away. When I was young, my parents and I went to see a fireworks show. It was a nice hotel in Florida. During the trip, we met a really nice woman. She was a foster mom for kids, adopted a lot of animals, and super into charity. An all-around lovely lady. After a few drinks, we all started dancing. I even ended up dancing with the woman. Eventually, my mom called over to us, saying that the fireworks were about to start. The volume of the music lowered. Then everyone made their way towards the balcony. The excitement was in the air. All of us anxious for a beautiful display of fireworks. Then all of a sudden, the woman shouts, "Ouch! Something bit me." She said it in such a sudden burst that we all looked at her. She had her hand on her chest with a slight smile. It must have been a bee sting or a wasp. Then when she pulled her hand away, there was a perfect hole in her chest. Her smile completely gone as she stood there a moment in shock. A complete silence fell over the crowd. She started bleeding from the hole, then fell to the ground. Everyone started panicking, people shouting and running in all directions. I was separated from my parents and hid in an elevator. Eventually, me and my parents found each other, and we ran outside. The police came to our hotel, and we had to give witness statements. I never really looked into it, but my dad still remembers what police told him. He said it was a freak accident. Apparently, it involved the gun that they used to signal the fireworks. It was just the sight of her, casually pulling her hand away, thinking it was a bee sting, and seeing this perfect hole, then just blood. It was so surreal. A long time ago, my mom, grandma, and I liked to go to a local tea shop together. It was a cute little frou-frou place that had just opened up. The first few times we went, all was well. They had the classic tea and sandwiches, even cute little desserts and all. One time when we went, everything was normal. But on the way home, we received a call that my other grandma had passed away. It was very sad, but she was battling cancer, so it wasn't exactly unexpected. A few months later, we decided to go to the tea shop again. That day on the way home, we got a call that my uncle had suddenly died. He had passed away from a heart attack. It was creepy for sure, but we didn't think much of it at the time. A few months after that, We went a third time. And for the third time, on the way home, we got another phone call. Another person in our family had died. We never went back to that tea shop again. The fact that 3 separate times we went to this place, 3 people died the same day. Finding out through phone calls on the way home makes me think something about that place was cursed. One day, it just suddenly closed. The sign was gone and everything, like it had never existed. I wonder if it just moved somewhere else to ruin another family elsewhere. I'm still nervous to even go in that area to this day.